Jenna.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, committee. Senate Bill 250 enacts the Right to Try for Individualized Treatments Act to permit certain manufacturers to make individualized investigative treatments available to certain requesting patients. This is a one-section bill. It'd be a new section of law, and subsection A just gives defined terms, and one of those is the individualized investigational treatment, which means drugs, biological products, or devices that are unique to and produced exclusively for an individualized patient based on the patient's own genetic profile. And then it lists some specific things that I'm not going to get into because I'm not a doctor and cannot speak to them precisely. Subsection B1 permits a manufacturer who operates within an eligible facility who has the FWA federal-wide assurance laws and regulations applicability to make an individualized investigative treatment and an eligible patient may request an individualized investigative treatment, including a drug, biological product, or device from an eligible facility or a manufacturer operating within a facility under this act. And then paragraph B or A2 lets the facility or manufacturer to provide that individualized investigative treatment to a patient and can require the patient to pay the cost of or the cost associated with the manufacturer of the drug. Subsection C provides that this act does not expand the coverage required of an insurer under the Insurance Code of Kansas. Subsection D says that a health plan or an insurance company may provide coverage for it, but shall not be required to, except that a governmental agency may pay the costs associated with the drug or device. Subsection E provides that if a patient dies while being treated by one of these individualized investigational drugs or treatments, the patient's heirs shall not be liable for outstanding debt related to the treatment. Subsection F provides protections to healthcare providers who provide these treatments based solely on the healthcare provider's recommendations to a patient to allow them to access one of these drugs. Subsection D states that an entity who is responsible for Medicare certification shall not take action against a healthcare provider based solely on that healthcare provider's recommendation that a patient would have access to this drug. Subsection I provides that the act shall not create a private cause of action against a manufacturer or of an individualized investigational treatment. And subsection J provides that this act shall not affect mandatory health coverage for participation in clinical trials under the Insurance Code of Kansas. This bill would go into effect upon publication in the statute book, which is July 1st, and I will be happy to answer any questions that do not require me to pronounce some of these medical terms.
Committee, do we have questions for Jenna? Senator Clifford.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I know you and I have discussed this, but Jenna, the language in page 2, 28 to 32 about payment required versus the language on page 3, 24 to 26, if the patient died, no payments required. I know the chair and I have discussed that, but it just seemed like a little conflict to me, but maybe that's
So on
tradition in hospitals.
2, that's a definition of a written informed consent, and it would state that the patient understands that the patient is liable for the expenses related to the drug. And then on the page 3, it just makes that debt only extend to the patient, and it would not carry on to the patient's heirs if a death were to occur.
Madam Chair, follow up. I guess in eye surgery, we don't have too many deaths, so I'm not accustomed to dealing with this, and I didn't know that maybe, Madam Chair, hospitals aren't live, are holding the bag essentially.
I think that we'll discover more about this with the proponent testimony.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Jenna.
Thank you, Jenna. We'll begin with Dr. Patrick Bailey, and is he online with us? Very good. Dr. Bailey, can you hear us?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Vice Chair Erickson, members of the committee, I'm Dr. Patrick Bailey from the Goldwater Institute. I appreciate the opportunity to join you for purposes of offering public comments on SB 250. This legislation is vital for preserving the right to try to save one's own life without being required to plead with the federal government for permission to do so. SB 250 applies to novel bespoke treatments for rare diseases, custom-made and based on one's own genetic profile. This legislation is made necessary because the FDA's regulatory scheme has simply not kept pace with advances in medicine. The current federal drug approval process simply did not contemplate, nor is it designed to effectively and efficiently consider treatments based on individual genetic profiles. Kansas has an important opportunity to lead the nation in resolving this issue for patients with rare diseases, and thereby potentially saving lives by enacting the Right to Try for Individualized Treatments Act as presented to you in SB 250. The original Right to Try gave patients the right to seek treatments that had passed the FDA's safety trials, but were still undergoing trials to determine efficacy before they received their final approval. Ultimately, in 2018, Congress passed and President Trump signed into law a federal Right to Try Act. The original Right to Try has made a dramatic impact in patients' lives. As an example, consider glioblastoma, an aggressive form of brain cancer. Historically, glioblastoma has a median length of survival of 8 months and a 5-year survival of only 7%. Often patients are left with no promising treatment options. However, because of the original Right to Try, some patients who were previously ineligible for a clinical trial can now access an immunotherapy. Instead of being sent home to put their affairs in order, these Right to Try patients have a median survival of nearly 22 months. Because of the continued medical advancements, particularly in genetic medicine, Right to Try needs to be updated. Bespoke treatments based on one specific DNA profile are not covered under the original Right to Try. Thus, the Right to Try for individualized treatments is necessary. Right to Try for individualized treatments as encapsulated in SB 250 does not change the original Right to Try. Rather, it would create a new, safe, and physician-directed pathway for patients with ultra-rare, life-threatening, or debilitating diseases for whom there are no other treatment options available and who could potentially benefit from an individualized treatment that is based on their own genetic profile. Pioneering medical innovations now make it possible to create an individualized treatment based on one's unique genetic information. However, the current clinical drug evaluation system, which was created in the 1960s, was designed for evaluating drugs that would be used to treat a large population. Hence, these individualized treatments are still subject to the same clinical trial process as medications intended for thousands of patients. The Right to Try for individualized treatment accounts for these advancements in genomic medicine and the innovations that provide the means to create a bespoke medical treatment based on one's own unique DNA profile. Right to Try for individualized treatments is already law in Arizona, Nevada, Louisiana, Mississippi, North Carolina, and Maryland, and the legislation is being considered in numerous other states this legislative season. Individualized bespoke treatments are being pioneered in the U.S. and abroad, but unfortunately, patients in the U.S. currently must travel thousands of miles to receive these potentially life-saving treatments. This is unnecessary. Kansas can be a leader in getting the right treatment to the right patient at the right time. It is important to note that removing the federal bureaucratic process that hinders these treatment options requires no additional taxpayer investment. It can also assuredly be achieved in a manner that addresses patient safety concerns and preserves informed consent. Kansas lawmakers have the authority and before them the legislative vehicle in SB 250 to unleash the potential of today's medical innovations to further benefit patients. I thank you for your time and your consideration.
Committee, thank you so much. Committee, since we only have 3 proponents and they are all virtual, no opponents, I'm going to break from tradition and allow you to ask one question or ask 8 questions from one of the conferees at a time rather than waiting until the end. So are there any questions for Dr. Bailey, committee? Yes, Senator Rose.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dr. Bailey, are there any treatments that are missing in this bill that should be added, or is this all inclusive of the topic?
I think the way that I would answer that is that the original right to try included drugs that were currently undergoing their FDA approval process and gotten through the safety components, but still were waiting for their efficacy component. And that's been, as I said, law since 2018. This law serves to update for drugs that are made specifically for people who have rare disease for whom a DNA-based medication therapy is developed. And so I can't prognosticate, as I think we probably wouldn't have prognosticated 10 years ago that we would be at this point of making drugs specific to one's DNA profile. It's hard for me to prognosticate where we'll be in another 10 years.
That's a follow-up. So I'm not trying to muddy the waters with this bill. I support this bill, but should the wording be more of a catch-all so that we don't need to keep doing this every time there's new innovation in medical treatments, or do you like the way it is right now?
I think that where we are right now regarding the medical technology, that this brings us up to date. It was kind of the purpose and the synthesis for the need to do it at this point in time in this way.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
I have a question for you. So we know that the federal law was a good law, but we also find that, as you said, this is kind of a newer innovation based upon your own genome. Would there be an issue with the federal government saying you can't do this, states? Have we found with any of the states that have done this or are looking at this a concern about the federal government saying you have to do it our way, or you have to go through the clinical trials?
I think our plan right now is very much to proceed with this as we proceeded with the original right to try, and that is to get this ultimately passed in enough states that we will gain the momentum to get it passed on a federal basis as well. So to the extent that there was no pushback from the federal government with the original right to try, I don't expect there's going to be federal pushback on this. And even if there was, based on the fact that President Trump was very supportive the first time around, we're expecting to similarly receive a favorable outcome when we ultimately get to that point on the federal level.
Committee, other questions? Yes, Senator Clifford.
Hello, Dr. Bailey. Thank you for your testimony. I'm an eye surgeon and state senator. I've done phase 2 and 3 trials. These treatments would not have had any kind of FDA trial since they're individualized. So is there a safety trial or a small group phase 2 already on these types of treatments before we get to this?
So Senator Clifford, repeat the first part of your question there, because I want to make sure that I address that.
Well, in the federal right to try, you're talking about drugs that have passed through the safety investigation.
Right.
1 or 2, grade 1, phase 1 or 2 trials. Here, these individualized treatments really would not have done that because they're for an individual. But is there on the technology itself, is there an FDA process that's already been completed?
So the safety and efficacy part of this is largely going to be driven by the federal-wide assurance component. In other words, for any of these drugs to be administered, first of all, a physician has to recommend it, and then through the facility that has a federal-wide assurance approval, it goes through their IRB. And so the professional review component will be taken care of by the institution's IRB, and only if the professional review by the institution through that IRB is deemed to be appropriate by that entity would the drug be administered to the patient?
Thank you. Follow up, I just will translate. The Institutional Review Board is the IRB, and that is a certain protection for the patient. So thank you for your answer.
Additional questions for the Dr. Bailey? Seeing none, we will thank you very much. We will move to Jason Kaufman. Jason, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you here. Can you hear
Please
me?
go ahead. Welcome to committee.
Hey, thank you for having me, Chairman and members of the committee. I'd like to share a little testimony of my daughter and what we've been going through, which pertains to this right to try. So no parent should ever hear the words I had to hear. October 1st, I found myself in an emergency room in Kansas City, finding out my 7-year-old daughter has a DIPG brain tumor. As Dr. Bailey brought up, it is a glioblastoma, the rarest, most aggressive form of brain cancers there is. And the doctor told me the prognosis is 6 to 9 months. There's no option for removal, no treatments, and the standard of care is radiation alone. So he told me to go home and make memories. No child has ever been cured of this. So I wasn't going to accept these terms from the doctor. So I found myself on the internet looking at various treatments. I found various clinical stage trials. In the last 30 years, there's only been one to ever make it to stage 3 clinical trials. But in the last 5 years, they've really pushed the ball forward in this. Some preclinical treatments even touted 100% response rates. So I hear one thing from a doctor, but then I find on the internet that there is things out there that can help and are proving to help. They've actually doubled the life expectancy here in the last few years on what my daughter has, from 6 to 9. Now they're telling me she could live, if I get on these trials, up to 18 months. But I called every clinic, every doctor's office that had these drugs. They all say the same thing. They are not FDA approved for my daughter's condition. The medicine may be FDA approved for different conditions, but not specifically for a glioblastoma, a DIPG. So I found that with the Public Right to Try Act, my daughter could be given these things. They're already FDA approved to not hurt her. They've passed their efficacies. They may be off label, but they're proving in the clinic that they're helping save lives. So I am a proponent for this. I support this bill. If it could save one Kansas life, to even consider it. Hearing it from a dad who has a daughter that's been given this, hope rings in something like this. So.
Jason, thank you for being here. Are there any questions for Jason Committee? Senator Owens.
Members of the committee, I just wanted to take a minute to thank Jason. I know it has got to be incredibly difficult for him. He's a personal friend of mine. Our entire community has been going through this journey with him. And so I shared with each of you a link to his daughter's Caring Bridge account so that anybody that would like to see and pray for Sweet Maddie is certainly welcome to do so. So, Jason, thank you so much for being willing to be here.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Thank you, Senator Owens. Are there any questions for Jason? Senator Petty.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Jason, I know this has to be terribly difficult for you to be here to testify on this bill concerning your treatment for your daughter's situation. But within the bill, it does say received a recommendation from the patient's physician for an individualized investigative treatment. So I'm just curious, in your daughter's particular case, have you had a physician actually make a recommendation for the drug that you have researched?
Yes, so vortoxetine, it is just a simple antidepressant. It can be given to anyone who claims to have depressive episodes. It's proven clinically effective on kids. But my daughter doesn't have those things, so the doctor will not prescribe that to her because it is quote unquote off label for brain tumors.
Just as a follow-up, so it hasn't then been prescribed by a physician for your daughter?
No, because they would risk their license to prescribe something. And I suppose I could lie to him and tell him my daughter has these episodes of depression, and we could, but sitting in the clinic with him, he's just not comfortable prescribing something that's off label.
Thank you.
Senator Clifford.
I'd like to talk to you off the record about that. This is Dr. Clifford. Senator Owens will get you in touch with me. Thank you.
So, Jason, I'm understanding that, by your testimony that you support the bill and you feel that your doctor or a doctor might be willing with the Right to Try Act, the Kansas Right to Try Act, that's individualized, that he would feel more comfortable in prescribing the medication or another doctor. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. Committee, we're going to move to our final proponent, which is Kendra Riley. Kendra, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Very good. Please proceed.
Sure. Thanks for having me. I wanted to share why SB 250 is really important to my family and families like mine who have children with rare diseases. I'm a mother of 3 children, 2 of which were diagnosed with a very rare genetic disorder in 2020 called metachromatic leukodystrophy, or MLD for short. It's a very rare and aggressive genetic disorder that attacks the brain and nervous system. Our middle daughter, Olivia, was first diagnosed with this and she began rapidly losing the ability to walk, to talk, to hold her head up. And doctors told us this condition would only worsen. And the expected lifespan is age 6. And she was not even 2 years old at the time. A few months later, our youngest daughter, Kira, was diagnosed with the same disorder. Unlike her older sister, however, Kira was a newborn and had not yet begun to show symptoms. And catching that early gave us the opportunity to try and save her life, since there was a cutting-edge gene therapy treatment that was showing really promising results for non-symptomatic MLD patients. Unfortunately, since our daughter Olivia was already showing symptoms, the treatment couldn't help her. But it could potentially save Kira's life if we moved quickly enough. The only issue was this personalized gene therapy, which would be tailored to Kira based on our DNA, wasn't available in the US due to the FDA's outdated drug approval process, which I'm sure you all know about. And in order to get her this treatment, we had to pack up our family and relocate to Milan, Italy for half a year. And this was during the pandemic. In a matter of a month, we were able to raise hundreds of thousands of dollars needed to move our family there and get our daughter this treatment before it was too late. Other families are not so lucky. I know many of them, and this is why this bill is so important to us. As genetic testing allows doctors to catch these diseases earlier, and with all these medical advances that are happening, I think more parents are going to be facing situations like we did. And I'd like to try and prevent that if at all possible. I'm happy to report that our youngest daughter, Kira, became the 32nd child in the world to receive this treatment, and it was a life-saving success. She's walking, she's talking, she's going to gymnastics, she's singing to Taylor Swift, doing all the fun things little girls do, and she's 5 years old right now with 0 symptoms. Whereas her sister Olivia, she's in hospice. Her condition did worsen. She has seizures every week. She's on 10 medications a day, and we don't know how much time we have left. She is 6 years old, and we just have to take it day by day with her. But none of these, Kira's everyday normal abilities would have been possible without her getting this treatment in Italy. A treatment she should have been able to access here in the US. And that's why SB 250 is so important. It just creates this right to try for these individualized treatments for patients with these life-threatening diseases. And I'd like to prevent this and other families in Kansas from dealing with situations like this, having the opportunity, having that right to save their child's life. And this would give families like mine the option to seek these investigational personalized therapies right here in Kansas, rather than having to drop everything in their life and move to a foreign country for 6 months. I know just based on the percentage of people living with rare diseases in America, if we compare that to the population of Kansas, that's roughly 290,000 people in Kansas alone with a rare disease who could potentially look for an option to live a full, healthy life like my daughter Kira will now. And that's why I support this bill. Thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you for being with this committee. Do we have questions for Kira or Kendra? Give me. Seeing none, Kendra, thank you so much for being with us. Committee, this
thank you.
includes the oral proponent testimony. There is written proponent testimony and neutral written only testimony. We will close the hearing on Senate Bill 250 since Monday is our last day for Senate bills. Do plan to take final action on Senate Bill 250 on Monday. We will now turn our attention to final action on Senate Bill 175. And my understanding is we have an amendment as the two parties have come together, and we look forward to seeing that amendment. Jenna, could you pass that out? And would anyone like a bill brief before we begin? Okay, I'm seeing head nods. So Jenna, after we receive this, if you would give us a bill brief, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senate Bill 175 updates the definition of athletic trainer and provides an exception for the practice of athletic training when an individual comes into the state with an out of jurisdiction athletic team or organization.
Committee questions for Jenna? And Senator Clifford, are you carrying this amendment?
Yes, I am, Madam
Right.
Chair.
Would you like to explain it or ask Jenna to explain it?
I'd like Jenna to first explain it, but I can add a little background.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just noticed a typo on the top. This does not affect the bill, but it just says proposed amendment to Senate Bill 174. That should be 175, which is the bill. So that's just a technical correction, which I'll fix in the PDF I send. This would amend the definition of athletic training, and it would read, athletic training means the practice of injury prevention, physical evaluation, emergency care, and referral, or physical reconditioning relating to athletic activity, including but not limited to sports participation, exercise, fitness training, strength and conditioning work, recreational fitness activities, and competitive athletics. This encompasses wellness promotion, risk management, immediate or emergency care, examination, assessment, and therapeutic intervention or rehabilitation of athletic injury and illness. And then the current language states athletic training also means, and that language is updated in lines 19 and 20 from the education of to educating and consulting with the public. Then you'll see that additional bracket arrow indicating consulting with the public regarding safe participation in athletic activities and proper training methods.
Questions for Jenna on the amendment? We'll go ahead and move to Senator Clifford if you would like to make your comments.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just think this is an example of the parties coming together and achieving a very satisfactory solution. So with that, I'd like to move my amendment.
Do I hear a second? Senator Murphy, committee, any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? This bill has passed out of committee. The amendment was adopted. We are back on the bill. Do I hear a motion on the bill? Senator Thomas?
Madam Chair, I move that we pass out Senate Bill 175 favorably as amended.
Second?
Second.
Senator Clifford, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, the bill has passed out of committee, and committee, we are adjourned.